What up, YouTube? What's going on? All right, we'll give it a couple minutes. All right, good. We are live. Let me bring it up on my phone. We are going to be watching. What's going on? I'll wait for a couple more people to come in. See if anybody does come in. But we are going to be watching the most insane man on
today's final
TV with Mr. Ballen. I always talk like this, even before anybody else is on the actual live. Don't know why I do it, but I do. So we are going to do this. It says one person is on, but that could be me because I need to turn this down. It could be me because I am watching it on my on my phone, so that way I can see the chats while I watch it on here. I need to get dual screens, which I think I have. I have some at my work that they said I could have, so I'll be bringing those and setting those up eventually. But for now, this is going to have to work. We got 5 people in, so we're going to say, what's going on, YouTube? It's the Bushy Beard, and I'm back, and I'm bushier than ever right now. It's Weird Wednesday. Let's get weird with it, right? We got Mr. Ballen, the most insane man on TV. If you are new to this channel, to this live stream, welcome. Enjoy. I am weird. I am me. I am unapologetically who I am. So if that's somebody you rock with, please do subscribe. Give this stream a like. We're trying to get as many people as possible to watch this stream so they might like what I do and subscribe. But let's get into it. So Weird Wednesdays is good for me. I think so too, Katie. Thank you very much. Katie, for you guys who don't know, is my girlfriend. So. And in 5 years, might be my wife. So we'll see. 5 years. That's an inside joke between, but who knows? Maybe 5 years. We'll see. Let's go ahead and get started with the most insane man on TV.
Story deals with a destructive, horrible, vile act that virtually...
Also, Mr. Ballen's link will be down in the description. Go sub to him, because without him, I would have no content to react to. So
anyone can do. However, there are no laws against it. But before we get into today's stories, if you're a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in story format, then you come to the right place, because that's all we do, and we upload once or twice every week. So if that's of interest to you, please ask the like button to be the back half of your 2-person horse costume for Halloween, and then when they accept, spend the night before drinking Miller Lite and eating falafel. Also, please subscribe to our channel and turn on all notifications.
I love those little mannerisms or things that he does that kind of just like are out of the world weird.
Don't miss any of our weekly uploads. All right, let's get into today's stories.
The long lost daughter.
In 2007, 60-year-old Michael Dick was living in Bow, East London with his wife and 2...
All right, I know I'm not the only one that's immature here, but let's it's a last name, guys. It's a last name.
2 daughters. While his life was not exactly exciting, it was good. He lived in a quiet and safe neighborhood, and Michael, who used to be a carpenter, was now semi-retired and got to spend the bulk of his time with his friends and family. But that year, something really started to bother him. 10 years prior, Michael had split up with his first wife, and after their divorce was finalized, his ex-wife and the daughter they had together, her name was Lisa, and she was 21 at the time, those two stayed in the family home in Sudbury, England, and Michael moved south about an hour and a half to Bow, East London. The divorce had been quite messy, and so Michael had not only lost touch with his ex-wife, he had also lost touch with Lisa. And so fast forward 10 years back to 2007, and Michael and Lisa had not spoken since the divorce, and Michael found himself suddenly feeling this unbelievable wave of grief over the loss of his relationship with his first child. And so after speaking with his current wife and his two other daughters, he decided that he had to go find Lisa. He had to be reunited with her. The only problem was he didn't know where Lisa lived, he didn't have her contact information, and he didn't know where his ex-wife was, so he couldn't even ask her how to get in touch with Lisa. However, he did have the street address of where they used to live in Sudbury, England, and so he decided that would be his starting point. So in August of that year, Michael and his two other younger daughters, they hopped in the car and they left Bo.
See, that would be hard to not know where one of your children is and want to reconnect. And I mean, that would be difficult. But luckily we live in an age where we have computers and things like that. So we're able to like track people down via computer. Prior to that, it was private investigators who are good at their job, but, are not computers.
East London, and they headed up to Sudbury. And when they got there, Michael navigated to his old street, which had brick houses lining each side of the road.
The English architecture is absolutely beautiful. I love the old style English architecture.
And he drove down until he spotted his old house, and he parked right out front. And then he alone hopped out of the car and he walked up to the front door. He took a deep breath and then he knocked on the door. When the door opened, it was not Lisa, it was not his ex-wife, it was some other family that he didn't know, and they didn't know Lisa or his ex-wife, and so they said, good luck finding your daughter, but we don't have any information for you. And so Michael was crushed, but he thanked them, and he turned around, and he went back to the car, and he told his other daughters about what he had just learned, and then from there, the trio just kind of began driving around Sudbury, half looking for Lisa out on the streets, although none of them thought they would actually find her, and then also kind of discussing what they were going to do next, because now they had nothing. And so as they're driving around the streets of Sudbury, they come to the realization that their best bet at finding Lisa is putting some sort of story in the local newspaper that hopefully she would see, and then she would contact Michael. And so they drove to the headquarters of the local paper, the Suffolk Free Press, and they went inside and they managed to speak to a reporter. And after telling the reporter Michael's story about...
Yes, Katie, eventually we can when I'm rich, but not there yet. That's a smart play, putting it in the newspaper. Back in the day, people actually read the newspaper. Now we just scroll on Reddit or other forms of social media.
How he's lost touch with Lisa. The reporter thought, you know what, this is actually a pretty interesting story, and I'd be happy to do a small feature on you guys. And so the reporter, along with a photographer, brought Michael and his two daughters outside. They took a picture of them, and then they told Michael, in the next edition of the paper that will run in a couple of days, we'll run this picture along with a...
All right, we're gonna guess here, right? And I want your guesses down in the comments. This is on this channel for a reason, right? This isn't not the TV man. So this is on this channel for a reason. Why is this on the channel? So he went through a nasty divorce. The daughter and the mom moved away. Wanted to track him down. Maybe he never was in a marriage. Maybe he's not thinking correctly. Maybe the daughter was never his daughter. I don't know. That's what I'm thinking, is that this is all a delusion for him.
A little write-up about how you're looking for Lisa, and we'll put your contact information in there, and hopefully she sees it and she reaches out to you and you can be reunited and live happily ever after. And so Michael thanked the reporter and the photographer, and then he and his other two daughters hopped in the car and headed back to Bow, East London. In 2007, at the same time that Michael was beginning his search for Lisa was actually beginning to think, you know what, I want to go find my dad. Okay. Lisa was now 31.
I was wrong.
21 years old. She had 3 kids of her own. She was married. She had moved out of Sudbury to a neighboring town. And she was thinking, I really want to have a relationship with my dad again so that my kids can have a relationship with him. And so she began speaking with her mother and with friends about how she should go about finding her dad. Because like Michael, she didn't have his contact information. She didn't have a phone number. She didn't know anyone who would. And then when she went on social media to look for him, he wasn't on there. And so she was kind of at a loss. boss. Then, one day in August, she was at her office and she was in the break room and she saw a copy of the Suffolk Free Press sitting out on the coffee table. So she picked it up and she began flipping through the pages, and then suddenly she stopped when she saw a picture of herself. She saw her and her mother walking along the streets of Sudbury. She had been in Sudbury just a couple of days ago to talk to her mom about finding her dad and kind of strategies for how to go about doing that. And then Lisa glanced at the caption for this photo and she nearly fell off of her chair. The man and the two girls who were the main focus of this photo that Lisa was in were her father and her two stepsisters. She just didn't recognize them. She just saw herself in the back of this photo. So,
wait, what? That is crazy. So they took this for the paper. By the way, his teeth are really yellow. But they took this for the paper and she just happened to be walking by? That is crazy.
So purely by chance, after being apart for over a decade, on the only day that Lisa happened to be in Sudbury talking to her mom about finding her father, she was literally 100 feet behind her father and her stepsisters as they were looking for her and putting out this ad in the paper to hopefully find her. And this one photo that the photographer took captured all of them in the same frame. Lisa would, of course, read the article and get her father's contact information. She would reach out, and initially Michael actually thought it was a scam and didn't believe this was actually Lisa calling to say, "I found myself in the picture of you in Sudbury." But eventually he was convinced and he drove right out to Sudbury and he got a chance to meet his grandkids for the first time. And today he and Lisa are still in touch.
That's awesome.
Before we get into our next...
That is crazy. BetterHelp has not subscribed to, or is not a partner of this channel, so we are not watching that ad. All right, we're right here.
Get back to the story.
However, Manscaped is, and so if you are looking for conditioner, body wash, shampoo, body spray, deodorant, lip balm, which is the bomb, if I have to say, BALM, not the other word, but fantastic stuff. Link down in the description. Use code Bushy20 for 20% off and free international shipping at checkout. So again, Bushy. Wait, is it Bushy20? I think so. We can go to one of my recent videos and we have Bushy20 for 20% off and free international shipping. Use code Bushy20.
Of course. If I told you to picture the Amazon rainforest in your head, you would likely picture a dense tropical wilderness full of amazing and exotic animals.
Yep.
And you'd be right, that is a good representation of the Amazon rainforest. But what a lot of people don't know is that the Amazon rainforest is also home to a massive city. It's called Manaus, and it sits right in the middle of the Amazon rainforest, right along the Amazon River. And it happens to be one of the most violent places in the entire world. All it takes in Manaus is simply walking down the wrong street or crossing the wrong person, and you can get shot or stabbed in broad daylight, and there's virtually nothing anyone can do to stop it.
Because it's in the middle of the rainforest.
1989, a 31-year-old former police officer named Wallace Souza decided to make a TV show about what it was actually like to live in his hometown of Manaus. And unlike other crime shows in Brazil that often censored out the most graphic content they covered, Wallace decided he wasn't going to do that. He wanted to expose the harsh reality of life in Manaus, and he felt like the only way to do that was to show everything. And so that year, he launched this show, which he called Canal Livre, which translates roughly to free channel. And true to form, there was no filter on what went on the air. And so this show was shocking. Viewers were given a front row seat to freshly murdered victims that are lying out in the road and slumped over chairs in restaurants and behind steering wheels. And the cameraman would zoom in on their fatal injuries, and they would zoom in on the faces of these people that have just died. Every gratuitous detail, every blood spatter, every grieving family member of the victim who's crying out in pain, all of it was shown on this TV show. And then in between these very dark and violent segments about gang killings and drug deals gone wrong, Canal Livre also had a much lighter side. They would bring on local artists to talk about what they're working on, to maybe try to sell some of their goods. The show would also focus on down on their luck families that needed help raising some money, and so the show was designed to get people to donate. And then also, for really no reason at all, there was a segment on the show where this puppet character would get into a fight with a man selling bread. It was a totally bizarre and shocking spectacle.
That's crazy.
And people of Manaus loved it. And then eventually the people of Brazil loved it. I mean, this was an extremely popular show. Because Wallace was often on camera on Canal Livre, he became very famous and very recognizable. And so when he would walk around Manaus, people would see him and literally just start clapping and cheering for him. And as he and his show became more and more popular across South America, Wallace decided he didn't just want to report on crime, he wanted to fight crime. So, on air, Wallace began
That's dumb.
berating the government for not being able to protect its citizens, and he berated the police for
This isn't going to last long.
not being able to catch the criminals. And then off the air, Wallace campaigned for and was elected to political office in Manaus.
Okay, that way of fighting crime. I thought he was going to become like a vigilante out there on the streets with a camera. That would be dumb.
Where he continued to push hard to reduce crime in the city. And so it wasn't long before Wallace went from just being a relatively well-known TV host to being one of the most beloved and influential and trustworthy people in all of Brazil. However, over the years, there was one strange thing about his show, Canal Livre, that people just couldn't wrap their heads around. This oddity was most obvious in a now famous episode of Canal Livre that aired sometime in the mid-2000s. This episode opens with a Canal Livre reporter making their way through a jungle, and there's a cameraman filming them from behind. And this reporter, they're very carefully walking through, kind of pushing branches out of the way and high-stepping over all the underbrush. And then at some point up ahead, you see there is a clearing, and there is a third person standing in this clearing, and they're clearly looking straight down at something on the ground that we can't see. But this third person is very occupied with whatever is on the ground. And so eventually, this reporter makes their way through the jungle into this clearing, and then as soon as the cameraman gets into the clearing as well, he looks down at what is on the ground. And what you see is what appears to be a log that has previously been lit on fire because it's still smoking and it's black and it's charred. But as the cameraman zooms in, you see there are hands on this log. So you realize it's not a log, it's a human being who's obviously deceased. And based on how badly charred they are and how much they're still smoking, you realize very quickly that this person must have been on fire very recently.
That is crazy. Crazy.
As recently as probably just a couple of minutes ago. Like right before the camera got here, this person was on fire. And so as you're kind of seeing this shocking image, the reporter suddenly talks about this person like he knows all the details of them already. He says, this person, it's a man, and they were not shot to death. They were doused with gasoline and burned alive. But at this point, the police had not come out. They had not seen this dead person yet. And so it made no sense that the reporter would have all this information on hand because no one knows this stuff yet. And based on just looking at this person's body, it was too badly burned to be able to tell whether it was a man or whether they
Did he create all the violence? Is that what we're about to find out?
had been shot or not, or whether gasoline was used. But when Wallace was questioned about where he and his reporters got their information from, he just said, look, we're a very popular show and people call us often before they call the police, and they give us information about what's happening in the city. And we have a huge team. We watch the police headquarters, we listen to the police's radio, we watch the morgue, we have loads of informants all over the city. And so we just get our information really, really quickly. And this answer was enough until 2008. That year, in October, the police arrested a former Manaus police officer who just went by the name Moa, and they accused him of 9 murders. And so they throw him in jail.
Holy crap.
But Moa, despite the seriousness of the charges against him, seems totally unfazed. It was obvious he had some sort of powerful connection outside of prison, some person or some entity that he fully expected was going to, at any moment, swoop in and magically get him out of prison. But that didn't happen. Moa just continued to sit in jail, and at some point that began to sink in that he was kind of on his own, and so he began to talk.
Yep.
And the story he would tell...
You leave them in long enough, they begin to talk. When they think somebody's coming to their rescue and they don't, that mouth starts to move.
Would shock Brazil. Moa would admit to having killed some people, but he would tell police, look, I'm just the assassin. The person who hired me for these killings is Wallace Sousa. It would turn out Wallace Sousa started his show, Canal Livre, with the best of intentions. But when his show became massively popular, and it in turn made him, Wallace, also massively popular and powerful, he became corrupt. And at some point, after his meteoric rise, he formed this very powerful drug cartel, and then in an effort to bolster his illegal dealings and to boost his show's ratings, he decided to start contracting hitmen like Moa to start taking out rival gang members in Manaus. And he would tell the hitman how he wanted them killed and where he wanted them killed and at what time. And then after the hitman agreed to do this, he, Wallace, would go tell his camera crews exactly where to go and at what time so that they would be arriving at the murder scene literally right as it was happening or right afterwards, allowing them the opportunity to get all the gory footage before anybody else. It would take the police a year to finally compile enough evidence to charge Wallace with murder, but they would do it in October of 2009, and eventually Wallace would turn himself in. However, he denied everything.
Is there a Netflix show about him? I gotta watch that.
And then before he went to trial, he would die of a heart attack in prison. And so we never actually got to learn the full extent of what exactly Wallace Sousa had done, how many people he had had assassinated, and how many of them were shown on his TV show. But we do know that at least 3 of his assassination victims were shown on his TV show, one of them being the person that was found out in the jungle. They really were a man. They really had not been shot. They had been burned alive with gasoline at Wallace's discretion.
That is so crazy to me. So crazy.
But in the end, the person who paid the highest price for the
What up, Anthony 911? Welcome to the stream.
The Canal Livre killings was Moa, the hitman who blew the whistle on what was going on with the show. On New Year's Day in 2017, a crime syndicate overran the prison where Moa was being held. Now, they had lots of targets of people they were going there to kill, and one of them was Moa. They were furious with him that he spoke to police and gave up information about the drug trade in Brazil. And so eventually, this angry mob of gangsters made their way over to Moa's cell, and when they found him, he was pressed up against the back of his cell wall, basically as far away from the bars as he possibly could be, and he began pleading for his life, and this horde was not having it. They were only there to kill him. And so they all have machetes and knives, and they're looking at him through the bars, and they say, we're going to come in there, we're going to cut you to pieces. And so then they start banging on the door, they're trying to hack the lock open, and Moa, he can't do anything. All he can do is kind of just keep himself all...
What a terrible position to be in. To know that your life is going to be done in a few minutes if they can breach this door. That's crazy.
The way to the back of the cell and hope they don't get in. And eventually they can't open the door, and they know it.
Wow.
And so they do the next best thing. They reach through the bars with a lighter and they light Moa's mattress on fire. And so Moa was trapped. He had nowhere to go. And so eventually the fire reached him and he burned alive.
Wow. Wow, wow, wow. That's crazy.
In 2010, 18-year-old Renee Marsden was living in Sydney, Australia with her parents and her 3 siblings. Renee was a very outgoing person who had a big circle of friends, and she was also very close with her family, especially her mom, Teresa. Teresa had given birth to Renee when she was only 19 years old, and so now
They look identical. Renee might have a little bit bigger of a smile, but they look pretty dang identical.
That Renee was a young woman, because of their closeness in ages, the two had become very close friends instead of mother and daughter. And so because of that dynamic,
never a good way to start off a story here.
Renee found herself always going to her mother to tell her anything going on in her life. She was her confidant. And that year, something major had disrupted Renee's life, and so naturally she went to her mom and she told her about it. It would turn out Renee's boyfriend of nearly 2 years, who she was madly in love with, well, she discovered he was cheating on her and didn't actually even care about her. He had sent these text messages that basically said as much. And so she confronted...
It's time to kill him. Let's get him. We'll send that horde after him.
Her boyfriend with these texts.
Because that horde was not having it. They were going to get to Moa no matter what.
Text messages, and he denied ever sending them. He said, look, I've never cheated on you. I don't know where those came from. I promise I've been faithful to you this entire time. But Renee just wasn't buying it, and so she had felt forced to break up with him. And so Renee naturally had turned to her mother for comfort and guidance, but Teresa, all she could really offer her daughter was, to remind her that time heals all wounds, and that certainly someday you will meet the right person for you. And amazingly, only a couple of weeks after this very painful breakup, Renee came home from work one day and she walked into the house and she was...
I already know what it is. The person she's about to meet is the person that broke up with her, that sent those texts. And yep, I already know
all
it.
Smiles and
gonna abduct her or kill her or something.
Considering
That's
how
crazy.
Unbelievably depressed she had been over the last couple of weeks, I mean, this really stood out. And so when her mom saw her smiling and radiating happiness, she rushed over to her and said, what's gotten into you? Why are you in such a good mood? And Renee would tell her that, actually, I've met another guy. And so Teresa said, who? Who did you meet? Who is this person? And she would tell her mom that his name is Braden Spiteri. He was 23 years old, and he was a graduate of the King's School, which is a really prestigious boys' school in Sydney. And his father was this really successful business person who owned this big construction company that he was set to inherit later on. And so she was just raving about how amazing this guy was. And Teresa was really happy. If nothing else, this was a very good distraction for her. And so she asked her daughter at some point, how'd you meet this guy? And Renee would tell her that Camilla had introduced them. Camilla Zaidan was Renee's best friend. They had met in high school. And Renee would explain to her mother that Braden was actually Camilla's ex-boyfriend, but they hadn't dated in a really long time, and there was no feelings between them. They were just friends at this point.
Not a good sign. It's set up. She's getting set up.
And apparently, after Renee had this really painful breakup, Camilla had just felt bad for her, and so she had gone out and found the best possible match for Renee, which in her mind was this guy Braden. Teresa knew Camilla really well because she was always over the house, and she knew Teresa's intentions must have been good, but she's thinking to herself, this is bad news. You don't want to have best friends, one dating the ex-boyfriend of the other. It's just bad news waiting to happen. And so Teresa couldn't even help herself, and she says to her daughter, do you really think it's a good idea to be dating Camilla's ex-boyfriend? But Renee would tell her mom, look, Camilla was totally upfront with me. She just wants me to be happy. She thinks Braden is a good match for me. They don't have feelings anymore, not at all. She's totally in support. And so Teresa still very much had her doubts that this was a good idea. But she put those doubts aside, and instead she said, okay, well, can you show me a picture of Braden? Can I see what he looks like? And so Renee pulls out her phone and she finds a picture of Braden and she shows it to her mom. And right away, her mom is looking at this picture and seeing that Braden is a very handsome guy, big bright smile. But she sees in this picture, Camilla is very clearly laying on his shoulder like she is his girlfriend. And so again, Teresa's thinking to herself,
it's about to go down.
This is not good. Someone is going to get hurt. But over the next couple of weeks and months, Renee and Braden texted each other all the time. I mean, Renee had her phone out basically 24/7 talking to Braden. The pair had made plans to meet up and see each other in person for the first time on several different occasions, but every single time they were set to go meet, one of them would have a conflict that would make it impossible to have this face-to-face meeting. And so before long, when they just could not get a meeting established, they kind of stopped trying to have face-to-face meetings. It was almost like they had built this really strong, flourishing relationship all via their phones, and it just was getting more and more awkward to actually go out and see each other in real life. It was just more comfortable doing it all on their phones. And so this digital-only relationship between Renee and Braden continued for almost a year until
I understand that, but at the same time, you gotta see each other.
January of 2012, when something horrible happened. Braden was in a horrible motorcycle accident. He survived the accident, but his passenger, his best friend, this guy named Richie, who was riding right on the back of his motorcycle, he didn't survive. He was killed in the accident. And it was determined that Braden was driving recklessly. And so he was charged with manslaughter and convicted and sentenced to 2 years in prison. Even though Renee's mother, Teresa, was totally upset about this accident. I mean, she did understand someone had lost their life and now Braden was going to jail for 2 years. She understood the seriousness of this accident. But at the same time, there was a part of her, her motherly, protective side of her, that was kind of relieved for her daughter. She figured with Braden being out of contact for 2 years in prison, that their relationship would end and Renee could go pursue somebody else.
That's not how it happens. They haven't had an actual in-person meeting, which means nothing's going to change. Text messages turn to letters. Like, come on. Really?
Who was not an ex-boyfriend of a close friend and was someone that she could actually see in person and not just have to text with all the time. But surprisingly, after Braden was transferred to Goulburn Prison, which is where he'd be serving his 2-year sentence, it's located about 2 hours to the south of...
Hey, now you can make a meeting time, right? You got nowhere else to go.
Sydney, his family smuggled a phone somehow into this jail, and he was able to continue texting with Renee.
Okay, now, no, he didn't go to prison. He didn't go to prison. This is just a backstory still, because there ain't no way, unless it's different where they live, which I think is Australia, I'm not sure. That, you don't get, I mean, it happens, sure, but like, it's just too coincidental in this story for it to happen.
And so after he was incarcerated, they just picked up their relationship like nothing had changed. Now, Renee's family did not like this development, and they told her as much. They thought this was a bad idea, that this was the wrong path for her, but Renee didn't care. She was totally in love. And in fact, over the first couple of weeks that he was in Goulburn Prison, their relationship only intensified. They actually agreed to get married as soon as he was released at the end of 2013.
Not even meeting each other, seeing each other in person, and you're already planning to get married? That's crazy. Crazy talk.
And in fact, Renee had already begun making wedding preparations. She had gone on eBay and found this beautiful tiara she would wear on her wedding day, and she had contracted a wedding photographer, and she had even contacted the Greek consulate to ask if it would be okay if Braden were allowed to enter their country, because they were planning to have their honeymoon in Greece, and Braden was going to be a convicted felon, and so she needed permission for him. But in August of 2013, just 2 months before Braden's expected release date,
let me guess. It got extended.
Something changed. Renee's mother, Teresa, got a text message from Braden, something she had never gotten before, and it said, "You need to check on your daughter. She's talking about killing herself." And so Teresa is totally taken aback by this message, and she goes right into Renee's bedroom where she is sitting on her bed, and her mother sits down next to her and says, "Honey, are you okay? You know, what's going on?" And Renee would look up at her mom and say, "Yeah, you know, I'm fine. What's going on with you?" And then Teresa would hold out the phone and show her the text message from Braden, and as soon as Renee saw it, she kind of sighed and looked at her mom and said, "I'm not going to hurt myself. We just broke up. Our relationship is over." Teresa knew this was going to be an extremely hard stretch of time for her daughter with another painful breakup here, but at the same time, Teresa thought to herself, this is probably for the best. That relationship just had bad news written all over it from the start, and so now she can begin to heal and move forward with her life. And so Teresa and Renee would sit in the room for a while just chatting on the bed, and then eventually Renee would tell her mom that her plans that night were to go out with her friends and cut loose and kind of just forget about this whole thing. And so Teresa sat in her bedroom on her bed as her daughter stood in front of the mirror and got ready, and then once Renee was ready, she and her mom hugged and kissed, and then Renee...
I have no idea where this is going to go. Like, zero idea where this is headed. I thought I knew, but I don't know.
Renee told her mom she'd be back soon, and then she left the house. A few hours later, Teresa received a
Unless she's now going out with her friend who's now going to kidnap her.
text message from her daughter, and it started with, "Mom, I love you so much, and I'm sorry for the pain I'm about to cause you. You can still talk."
Again, this is not her. This is not her.
Talk to me, though. Just call out my name, and I'll be there. Teresa read this message and didn't really know what to make.
Wait, I gotta read. I love you so much, and I'm sorry for everything. Still be here and be around when you need to talk. You're the most amazing person and mother ever, and my very best friend. I wasn't happy. And understand that it doesn't let this ruin everyone else. You need to take care of. Okay, I need you to be strong for me.
Talk to me, though. Just call out my name, and I'll be there. Teresa read this message and didn't really know what to make of it.
It wasn't written by her daughter.
She knew her daughter was almost certainly very upset about this breakup, but she didn't really understand the context of this message, and so she called her daughter. She didn't pick up, so she called her again, and after that second time her daughter didn't answer, she sent her a text message that just said, "Please call me back." But she sat there kind of waiting for her daughter's call, but it never came. And so Teresa, starting to feel a little bit worried about her daughter, she called Camilla and she asked her, "Hey, have you talked to Renee tonight? Because I can't get in touch with her." And Camilla would tell Teresa that actually, yeah, I just got a very strange text message from her that just said, "I love you."
Lies, 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 lies.
I'm sorry. And so at this point, the two women understood that there could be something very wrong with Renee. And so they met up and drove all around Sydney, going to all the places.
I don't trust Camilla. Not one bit. Not one bit. Nope, nope, nope.
That Renee was known to go to. But after several hours of looking and not hearing back from Renee, they really didn't know what to do. And so the two women drove back to Teresa's house, so Renee's house, and they went inside and they sat down. And at that point, Teresa's husband and the rest of Renee's siblings, they were all there, and everyone's just kind of sitting around wondering what to do next, when around 9:30 at night, they heard a knock on the door. And it was the police coming to inform them that they had found Renee's car parked in an area that it shouldn't have been, but Renee wasn't there. And so they were coming to ask if they knew where she was and why her car might be out there. And so at this point, the family is totally terrified. They tell the police about these strange text messages, and then before long, the parents just rush outside, they hop in their cars, and they drive out to where their daughter's car is. And where Renee's car was parked was in an area called The Gap. It basically was this sheer cliff overlooking the ocean. The parents got out and they searched their daughter's car, but there was no sign of where she had gone based on the car. And so they began running up and down the cliffs. There was a sidewalk that kind of ran parallel to the edge of the cliff, and they're running up and down, hoping they're going to...
I don't know what the motive would be, right? I don't know what the motive would be right now for Camilla and Braden or Brandon or whatever his name is to kill her. There's got to be some motive.
To find their daughter, but there's no sign of her. And then at some point, Teresa climbed up to one of the highest points of the cliff. And when she got up there, she found her daughter's black flat shoes. And they were placed neatly together on the ground right in front of the fence that was there to prevent people from getting too close to the edge of the cliff. But despite an extensive...
Again, to me, that would scream somebody else did it. Like, why would you take your shoes off if you're about to kill yourself? Like, or if you're about to do something that stupid, why would you take your shoes off? Makes no sense.
Search that night, they couldn't find any sign of Renee. She was nowhere to be found.
She didn't
However, the police would discover the following day that there was actually a camera that was looking at that section of the cliffs. And so they reviewed this footage and they found Renee. They saw what happened to her. And in this camera footage, you see Renee walking up the trail in the middle of the night, and she stops and she takes off her shoes and she puts them down, and then she hops over that fence. Now, the fence was not right up against the very edge of the cliff. It was set back maybe 3 or 4 feet. And so she hops over the fence, and then she steps very carefully to the edge of the cliff, and she kind of peeks over the edge and then looks visibly terrified, and she moves backwards a few steps until her back is pressed up against the fence. And then she pulls out her phone and she sends 3 text messages. One was to her mother, which is the text about how she loved her and she...
I'm completely wrong. Oh my God.
Was sorry for the
I
pain
have
she
no
was going
idea.
to cause
I have no idea where this is going.
her. And then the other two text messages were to Camilla and also to Braden. However, to this day, we don't actually know what either of those text messages said. And then after sending these 3 text messages, Renee takes her phone and she throws it off the cliff into the water. And then she sat down and began kind of shimmying herself forward towards the edge. Now, the camera did not actually pick her up falling off the cliff, but it's assumed when she went out of frame that she had fallen off the cliff to her death. Her body would never be recovered. Renee's death was ruled a suicide. However, her family, in addition to being totally devastated by this horrible loss, they felt totally confused. They had no idea why this had happened, but they were certain it had to have something to do with this recent breakup with Braden Spiteri. And so they tried to get in touch with Braden, but he wasn't getting back in touch with them. And so the family contacted the police and said, can you reach out to the prison where he is and set up a meeting?
He was never in prison. We know that. That's a given.
So the police obliged them and they called Goulburn Prison. And when they spoke to the prison, they said, who? Braden who?
Exactly.
Yeah, we don't have a Braden Spiteri here. We never have. And the reason was, Braden Spiteri wasn't real. Renee's friend, Camilla,
not real. I didn't see that coming.
had made him up. He was a fictitious person. That picture of Braden Spiteri where Camilla is laying on his shoulder, that was just some random person she had met in a club. Camilla had always been very possessive of Renee.
So they didn't even send pictures. Like, they didn't see each other. They didn't send pictures. Nothing. That's crazy.
Ever since they had met in high school, and at some point, she had just decided that she wanted even more control over Renee. And so the first thing she did is she convinced Renee that her earlier boyfriend, the one she'd been dating for 2 years before Braden, she convinced Renee that he had been cheating on her the whole time, he was unfaithful, that he didn't love her, and then she had created those text messages and given them to Renee and convinced Renee that
Told you you cannot trust Camilla.
that was something he had said, and before long, Renee totally believed it. She approached her boyfriend. He denied it, but Camilla the whole time is telling Renee, he's lying to you. He's been doing this whole time. I know he's a bad guy.
Crazy.
And so Renee had listened to her best friend, and she had severed that relationship. And then almost immediately after that, Camilla swoops in to the rescue and connects Renee with this Braden guy, Camilla's supposed ex-boyfriend, who really was just Camilla on the other side of the phone. And for nearly 2 years, Camilla kept this charade up, and Renee completely believed this was a real person, that Braden was her boyfriend. She loved him. And eventually, in June of 2013, so 2 months before Renee died, she confided in Braden, aka Camilla, that her friend Camilla was toxic and mean and controlling, and she didn't want to be her friend anymore.
That is crazy.
And so Camilla, she's reading this and she's furious. And so she decides the only way to get...
She was like, for 2 years, I have been your boyfriend. I have listened to your crap. I have done everything for you for 2 long years. Actually more, because he was in jail for 2 long years. And this is how you gonna treat me?
Get revenge on Renee and regain control of her is to have Braden break up with her. And so 2 months later, on August 5th, 2013, so on the day that Renee died, she was out to lunch at around 1 p.m. with a coworker when she gets a text message from Braden that just kind of comes out of the blue, and it says, I need a break from you. Now, this is around the time that they're planning their wedding. And so Renee is totally heartbroken, and she's trying to get in touch with him and call him. He's not picking up. And then fast forward to about 2:45 p.m. that afternoon, we know Renee called Goulburn Prison. It was the first time she had done that. Now, we don't know who she spoke to or what they actually talked about, but it's nearly guaranteed that she learned Braden Spiteri was not being held there. And so almost certainly she would have realized that Braden is either not real, or Braden had been lying to her in such a huge way that the relationship could never work. And so no matter what, this chapter of her life was totally over. And so later that day, when she was sitting on her bed in her bedroom and her mom came in and she asked her how she was doing, it's very likely that Renee was devastated. She was crushed and probably kind of embarrassed about how badly she had just been duped by this Braden person, whoever that was. And so even though normally Renee would tell her mother everything, her mother was her confidant, she loved her mother, it was like she just couldn't bring herself to discuss what was happening to her. It was just so enormous, it was so overwhelming that she hid it from her mother. And instead, she just got dressed up, said goodbye to her mom, and then she headed out to the cliffs. No charges were ever brought against Camilla because catfishing, which is exactly what she was doing, which is using a fictitious online persona to lure people into relationships, well, that's not considered a crime in Australia. And Camilla, despite being pressed by the police and Renee's family, has never taken responsibility for this and has never apologized. So that's going to do it, guys.
Can never trust Camilla. You can't trust her. Anyways, guys, if you like this live stream, please hit that thumbs up. If not, you can hit the thumbs down. Not going to hurt my feelings. You can hit the thumbs up because it ain't going to hurt yours. We're on our way to 50K. We're getting there pretty quick. If you would like to, please subscribe. I listen to a lot of Mr. Ballen. I hope each and every one of y'all have an absolutely fantastic day. And as always, until next time, YouTube, smile like you mean it. From